You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a more modern approach to selling, the application of virtual and hybrid selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. And welcome to this episode of the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined by Nigel Baldwin. Nigel, welcome.
Good morning, Fred. Thank you for your time.
So, Nigel, you are a sales coach as opposed to a trainer. Now, we've just been having this conversation off air, so I want Nigel to explain again what he was saying to me about the differences he sees in those two roles.
And thank you for stressing the way I see it, because I know there's an awful lot of sales trainers out there who do a wonderful job, and they do the job that they're paid for. I always think the difference, going back, and I can only base this on my experience and the training that I've received over the years. I'll tell a story about a golfer called Louis Oosthuizen, who, those who don't know anything about golf, won the Open, I think it was in 2010. And the Open, for those unfamiliar with golf, is the tournament. That's the one that every golfer wants to win. And Louis, going into that tournament, was playing the worst golf he'd ever played. He'd lost his swing, he'd lost his confidence. And so he sat down with his coaching team, and they said, Louis, you're not playing well at the moment, but we want you to look back at the round this year where you really, everything ticked, everything worked, every component of your swing was perfect. What round was that? And I think off the top of my mind, he said that he played well in the Masters. Third round, shot a 67. So they said, okay, Louis. And what was so good about that? And he told them, and he thought, and he took time. And what was so good about your swing? And he told them, and he thought, and they had a conversation around this. And they said, so what words would you associate with the third round? And Louis told them all kinds of, like control and confidence, and being in a zone where he wasn't even really thinking about hitting a golf ball. It just seemed to happen. And all these words built up this picture. And they said, Louis, what color would you associate with all this? If you had to choose a color, what color would you associate with what we've spent the last hour discussing? And I don't know why, but Louis said red. So the coach said, right, Louis, going into the Open next week, we'd really like you to draw a red dot on your golf glove. So every time that you pull that golf glove on before every shot, you look down and you see that red dot, and you think of the time that you were in complete control of your game, that zone. Anyway, long and the short of it, he won the Open, and he always looks back and said it was because of that coaching input. And I always think the difference between sales training and sales coaching is trainers tend to tell you what to think, how to think, and what color you should put on your glove. Whereas coaches will want to see why, ask for your perception and your input, and you then make the decision as the learner. And that's how I differentiate between trainers and coaches.
No, it makes a lot of sense. But for me, there's room for both.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm
Totally.
sure, I mean, someone at that level of professional sport has probably got a couple of coaches. That's his mindset coach. There will be a guy who is sat with him looking at his swing and saying, Louis, stop. Yeah. Don't do it like that. That is wrong. Yeah. And correcting things almost like on a technical level. So in sales, some salespeople don't seem to want any assistance at all. And you look at people at top of their game, they surround themselves with people who are very, very specialist in each of those, don't they?
They do. And again, you're dead right, Fred. I've offered goodness knows how many times to help goodness knows how many people, and the intention is always there. The intention is honourable, etc. And you never get taken up on it. But each to his own. Each to his own.
Each to his own. Again, off air, we were talking about the my attitude for right or wrong is becoming a little bit of. I think I said to you, I don't care.
Yeah.
But by that, actually it's wrong. I do care. I care passionately about it. But if you don't care, I don't. I haven't got time to. I want to work with the people that do, because then we can have an impact. I don't know how you are on that one as well.
Yeah, it's inspiration. I see a lot of my role as inspiring. Motivation. Yes, I motivate, but a lot of that has to come from the person as well. Are they motivated to learn? Are they motivated to try different things? I suppose it's coming back to individuals. Individuals will have either a fixed mindset or a growth mindset, and it's really finding out how they want to learn, and helping them achieve things. For example, if you've got a fixed mindset and you're a perfectionist, it's exceptionally difficult for them to understand what you're trying to put across. Yeah. And very difficult for them to change. But once you realize that and start working with people on that basis, it becomes a lot easier for both of you.
Yeah. Have we basically described a fundamental sales skill there, in that we're qualifying a bit better? We're being a bit more picky about who we want to work with, who we want to partner with. It takes two to tango, I say a lot, and we're picking our dance partners better.
Yes, and qualifying out is just as important as qualifying in. But the pressure that a lot of salespeople are under with regards to numbers and activity levels, they tend not to qualify out. They tend to think that there's an opportunity in everything that everybody they're talking to. Whereas you save so much time and so much wasted time by qualifying out. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I remember one of my best was a large supermarket chain based in Chepstow, and I had great pleasure after 45 minutes of the meeting saying, actually, my business model I don't think is gonna work with this, and get up to leave. I was soon asked to sit back down again, but qualifying out is vital in selling.
It is, and I'd say I use that expression. It takes two to tango, as you know. And I talk about collaboration. I think collaborative selling and having that mindset, that approach, is more important than ever. We see these evolutions of sales, and so whether you're coached to do that, trained to do that, if you can naturally do it, happy days. But I think there's quite a lot of
Mark Hunter in his book, A Mind for Sales, I think hits it on the head. If your mindset is to help and not to sell, you will go a lot further in this world than if you go out and try and sell something. That's my opinion. I know it's Mark Hunter's opinion, but I think it's right. And I certainly, the people I coach, if you're having to go in on a Monday morning, and again, this is based on, I've been in those shoes. I've been the sweaty, nervous wreck behind a telephone, having to hit 70 calls a day. Yellow pages, there's the phone, now crack on. We've all done that. But I certainly felt, when I started thinking about starting my own business, was the fact, have a mindset of, I'm going in on a Monday morning and I'm picking up the phone to suggest all kinds of possibilities to people where I can help them. Now, that is a fantastic mindset. Sunday evenings, you don't get that knotted feeling in your stomach on a Sunday evening if you go in with that mindset. If you don't, and you're thinking, I've got to sell things on Monday to 70 people that I'm going to pick up the phone and talk to, that's not an enjoyable Sunday evening, as far as I'm concerned. There might be people out there who totally disagree, and that's fine. But I certainly found it. I don't think I've ever sold anything to anybody. I've helped them, visualize and then achieve something that they didn't think was possible until they spoke to me.
I love that. I love that reframe, suggesting possibilities to people. That's superb. I think I might have the podcast title. No, it's really good. No, again, I've spoke to Mark, and again, yeah, I love the way he says it, and the whole kind of service mentality.
But again, going back to the training element, I don't know why, that, and we discussed this briefly beforehand, I don't know why there's this kind of, sell, always be closing, all this type of thing. I've always kicked against.
Yeah. But then you were telling me the story, weren't you, about the first training was in the 80s, where that would have been where it was trained. That's what was considered a clever idea at the time.
And I still kicked against it. It still to me didn't feel the right way. And if something doesn't feel right to you, you know this, Fred, you're not going to use it. Or if you do use it, it's not going to come across the way that you perceive that it wants to come across.
Yeah.
You've got to, it's on my profile. You have to love your process. It's all about building, your framework process, whatever you want to call it. You build what works for you and you find out what works for you. And as I say, it's a dynamic document. I continually change mine, tweak it, add things, take things away. Even, that's 30 years into the industry, 30 years plus, I'm still doing it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, you held that up to me earlier, and it's got scribbles all over it. Where one of the scribbles might well have been from yesterday, where you thought, "Oh, that's nice. That fits in with that way of doing something. It's a little bit different, a little bit more modern. It's just adapting that and moving it forward."
And a lot of it is based probably on my inability to learn, because we were discussing earlier that since 1993, every sales meeting I've ever had, I've always started the conversation with, what would you like from today? And then shut up and listened. And it's exactly the same at the end of the process. I remember, as going through sales training, being told that there's probably 27 different ways of closing a sale. I hate that word anyway, because I open relationships. I can't stand the word closing. It goes back to the days of, you're hitting target on a Thursday and then everybody going down the pub on a Thursday because you've hit your target and you never want to talk to the customer ever again. But I end every meeting right, how do we make this happen? And then again, shut up. And then I don't have to remember that there's 27 different ways of closing.
It's funny actually you talk about that. I also rail against that word. I prefer gaining commitment. It's moving commitment on us to work together and the rest of it. But it's funny. There's 2 books I read last year, and I spoke to both the authors. Both talk about closing. So I don't know if you've read this. Matt Elwell talks about open with a close, and James Muir talks about the perfect close.
Yeah.
And I basically opened the same question. Like, come on, guys, it's a little bit 80s. And they slapped me down, put me in my place where I belonged, and go, no, totally not. It is not. And when you listen to what they say, James talks about it's about the series of advancements getting you to the point where you can help somebody and work with them. And Matt's pretty much along the lines of, it's about opening the relationship. And if you leave something open, he said the reason you close it's to the next, it's the next step. Because if you leave something open, you're actually not doing anybody a favor at all. That's why you have to be one way or another. Yeah. And honestly, they're good books. I think you'll enjoy them.
But usually this goes then down to semantics of because we're all, in effect, I've always said selling is a progression of agreements. So in the end, I don't feel the way I look at closing, you ever close anything, because there's always a next agreement to work on.
Yeah,
there's always the next step, there's always the next stage, there's always bringing fresh perspective, fresh ideas. As I say, I get a lot of flack on LinkedIn because I don't like the word close, and again, it's an industry word, it's an industry norm, people understand it, so people use it.
Yeah, and then both those guys have used it in their book title for that reason, and then go into what I think it's some excellent pieces of work. And like you say, the next steps. Okay, so we have closed, or we have agreed to work together. You could argue it's only just begun then.
Yeah.
Now you've got to deliver on what that promise is and what the outcomes that you're promising for me. So
true. Yeah.
So no, it makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned you do have a framework, you kind of a process, again, semantics again, that you've got ways in which you can sort of hang around what it is you'll help people with. Can you give us a little bit of insight into that?
It's really going back to the qualification bit of finding it. I always found, and as I say, this was based on the recruitment industry, which is what I first started in. I needed to quickly understand, because I walked into, you're too young for this, Fred, but a company called Alfred Marks in Reading many years ago. I'd come out of Reading University. I didn't really know what to do with my life. So I walked into a recruitment agency. Now, I was from Devon, although I was at Reading University. I had no idea of what the recruitment industry was. Because in Devon at the time, when we were discussing this earlier, but Devon at the time, you either knew somebody who had a job and was interested in talking about that job with you, or you picked up the North Devon Journal Herald and it was sits back. And that was it. Yes. So I walked into Alfred Marks, which is now part of Adecco, and said, Reading University, I've finished. What do I do now? And they said, have you ever thought about the recruitment industry? And I said, I honestly haven't got a clue what that is. So they explained it to me, and I said, well, yes, I'll sounds interesting. I'll give it a go. Anyways, cut a long story short, I worked for them. I worked for another company within recruitment, and I looked at the business model and worked out how they created revenue. I was then really, and I always have been, really curious. I don't know where that comes from, the curiosity of how people create revenue. So I found out how my industry created revenue. I looked at prospects and customers and was really interested in how they created revenue. And then I looked at my prospects and customers and how they created revenue for their customers. So it's kind of three levels of understanding of how this all fits together. And then looked at it and thought, well, I don't think much of the recruitment industry business model that I've seen. I don't particularly like working within it. I was successful at it, but I didn't enjoy working in it. So I decided to go and start my own on that kind of premise of how I can help people create revenue. And once you speak to people understanding your industry and you have the business acumen to discuss that with people at various levels of the business. So you're going from transport supervisor within logistics, for example, right up to distribution director. If you've got that understanding, then it's easy to find ways of helping them achieve what they want to achieve. And to me, that's how I built the business. That's how I went through $1 million turnover in 13 months from starting with nothing to building a business of 2.3 million. That's basically how I did it, and the business model that I used. But there's an awful lot of understanding to go into it, which maybe sometimes when we're placing people in our industry, which is a shame, we don't spend time on those type of areas.
Let me just highlight the stuff you said there, because it was elegantly simple. But as you say, there's depth to it. But basically, understand your industry, have the level of business acumen to be able to apply that, and help people achieve what they want to be achieved.
Yep.
Now, you could apply that to any industry whatsoever. I think you mentioned logistics, but it could be logistics, could be IT.
Anything.
It could be selling nuts and bolts. It doesn't matter, does it?
No.
But as you say, it sounds
if
simple, but the understanding piece, that's where
the fun starts.
I think
that's
so.
where the fun starts. Otherwise, it's just transactional.
Understand the industry, not understand your product, understand your service, and be able to talk at length about that. It's a part of it. But the magic comes from understanding the industry, correct?
Yeah, there's a great quote. I can't remember. You'll know. You have to be. You have to understand before you be expected to be understood.
Oh, now you put. I like the way you put that back. Is it seek first to understand to be understood?
Stephen, I can't remember his surname.
It's one of the 7 habits. Stephen
Yes,
Covey.
it is.
Yes,
right.
yeah.
And you're spot on. But I like to flip that with the fact that so does the buyer.
Go on.
They have to understand me as the seller before they can be expect. So I think it always works two ways. I know it was originally, maybe said with regards the seller, but it's a two-way process. For example, working in recruitment, when I first started my business, everybody can say, well, you're a recruitment agency. Well, okay, a minute. What's your understanding of a recruitment agency? Well, you do this, this, and this. Sorry, that's your perception of what an agency is. Now, can I tell you what I actually do for people?
So when you say it's about seeking to, they need to understand the seller, are you giving carte blanche for people to whip out the company presentation and start talking about themselves early?
No, and
I knew the answer was no. So give us more detail on
that. I've never been into that, but again, it's creating that, and I know it's an overused word, partnership, but it's creating a partnership of where you can help each other. It's got to be a win-win situation. If you're developing a business relationship, and I was very fortunate, I've had customers for in excess of 20 years. Now, if you can do that, as well as I do, you're constantly offering what helps them. And as I say, I built a business on it. If something wasn't working, and as I said, I didn't like the recruitment model at the time, so I changed what the offer was and went and talked to people about it. As you say, it sounds simple. There are different, obviously, levels of it, but that's really what it's all about, as far as I'm concerned.
No, I think you're right. Partnership's a hugely overused word. People just throw it around willy-nilly, often because they can say, oh, you're my partner, which you're going to be eyes wide open because they're probably going to try and get something from you by giving you this nice little title. That's my opinion. When somebody understands partnering, when they use partnering skills, and they can bring that to the party, the PQ. This is why I wrote the book about it. I know because I'm so passionate about this, then both parties can properly understand how to build a partnership using those skills, which we can understand, we can measure, we can train. Then we're doing it properly. Then you can say this is a proper partnership because we're doing these things.
I've just moved house, so I was going through 20 years of all kinds of things, and I came across this, and this is what I'm talking about really here, Fred. Nigel approached me in the 1990s with a concept that was different from anything we had previously considered. What Nigel offered meant I won't go into details, but in effect, handle all recruitment activity so that the concerns became their problem, Nigel's problem. We retained all our blah, 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 blah. I found Nigel's approach to difficulties constructive, often innovative, and reasonable for both parties. Okay? But it says, I was skeptical at first. The partnership that we have enjoyed since has been hugely beneficial for both companies. Now, that's somebody at C-level, as the Americans would say, who's openly said they were skeptical that this would work. To me, that is what it's all about. You're going out, you're suggesting things to help people. Although they're skeptical, if you carry it through, you'll have a customer for years and years and years.
Yeah. Again, I scribbling down the key concepts I think coming out of that. So the concept was different. Okay. Concerns became your problem. It was constructive, it was innovative, and it was reasonable for both parties.
But just going back to that initial point, it was different. Yes. That's my when I was saying, when you're talking to people, they have a perception of what you do. Everybody has a perception. Yeah. My thing was to challenge that perception. Okay, I understand that that's the way you view recruitment, but that's not me. And lots of people, that's the first opportunity I had at differentiating myself from the entire industry. People don't do that enough, Fred, because they just talk to customers as if the customer understands what they do, and they don't. There's an awful lot of business owners out there who are desperate to talk to people to make their pile of problems next to them disappear.
Mm. Great point. So we're talking to customers that we assume they understand and care is the other thing. But I guess because we live, sleep, eat, breathe what we do, and it's kind of obvious to us, and we see it every day, and it's just like, well,
Yep.
that's just it, isn't it? We don't realize that people just aren't thinking about us and our particular part of where we can help, where we can do something, where they have a problem and we have the solution. We've got the key to that.
Well, I think Mark Hunter in his book says nobody gets out of bed wanting to speak to you in the morning.
Yeah,
Looking
can't
forward
wait
to
to
your
get
phone
loads of
call.
salespeople to ring me up. Yeah.
I think Mark says not even his mother does that. So,
I think he does, yeah.
It's a very good point. But a lot of the fear salespeople have is that, don't forget, as discussed previously, they're picking up the phone to sell. They've been trained how to do that. Yeah. And what I'm saying is come back a whole step from that and understand what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Which for me starts to speak about another phrase I really like, which is being different is not a differentiator.
No.
Because you were different, yes, in a way which was relevant to that customer and been hugely relevant over the course of all these years. Now, if it wasn't, doesn't really matter at all. It's totally irrelevant. It's not a differentiator. Just do not pass go, do not carry on talking. But it was. And then, of course, you'd worked out that it will be on, I can help them understand that.
Yes.
But I think that's a really important one. Being different isn't necessarily a differentiator.
No.
Got to be relevant to that customer. Do they fit? Do they match? Can you qualify them as someone who
that goes back, Fred, to realizing how you create revenue, how your prospects create revenue, and how your prospect help their customers create revenue. Because you can sell at this level, you can provide a service or a product at this level, but then understand how you can go to this level to help even further. And if you've got that business acumen, you can say, well, hang on a minute, we've solved this problem, but why is this problem happened? Why is, and you go deeper into it with them. And if you do that, and the interest and the curiosity and the desire is there in order to help, as I say, it moves from a transactional relationship to a relationship over 20 plus years.
Yeah. It's funny, you've just talked about, well, why is that happening and why is that happening? I've made a tweaks on my own stuff because, again, I find it amazing the things that we forget that work really well. I mean, our job to remember this to help people understand them. And we're talking about something, and it was kind of off the cuff. I said, "Oh, yeah, it's about the 5 whys, isn't it?" And the whole group looked at me and go, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
5 whys. Do you know 5 whys? They'd never heard of 5 whys.
Yeah.
So when I explained it, they went, "Oh, what you actually mean? Why 5 times?" Again, that's exactly what the tool is. It's not particularly difficult.
Yeah.
But that's again, so effective. I went, yeah,
it is. But we were discussing this earlier. The simple things work, but people don't then do it. How many times have you gone out on a sales visit with a salesperson where you've gone through the 5 whys, but they don't feel that they were able to do that within the meeting? The number of times I've come out of a meeting, sitting in a car, obviously before COVID, and then you say to the sales guy, so how do you think that went? Yeah, great. But I just didn't think it was the right time to, as I say, you've got to follow a process. You've got to love the process for the benefit of the buyer as well.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, do you find that sometimes people want to get too spangly? They want to use too many advanced, complex, tools when actually the simple thing would work better. They're trying to run off into the distance before they're even walking and just actually basically just asking some good solid questions, doing some stuff which is the basics. The basics will see you really well. Don't try and overcomplicate stuff.
I think whatever it takes in order to love your process, something, for example, the 9-block processing model will work with some people. I remember being flown to Austin, Texas, and being presented with that and writing something that I can't say live on camera on my notebook at the time, because to me, if you've got to break a conversation down like that, then there's there's something seriously wrong with life.
Mm. Yeah.
But again, they've sold a lot more books than I have. So I you know.
maybe do a
Maybe I've got it wrong.
Do a 6 block, do a 3 block then. That's fine.
Look, let's go for 12, Fred. Let's go for 12.
Yes, but no, that's the point I'm making. Oh, 9, that's what it was. We've got to make it 12. Well, I'll tell you what, let's double it. 24. Yeah. It's actually, no, maybe it's the 1 block process. Yeah. And we were talking about rugby, weren't we? And I remember when I played in Spain for a year, we'd got a New Zealand coach dropped in on the way back from the World Cup, and I was doing the translation, and he'd got us doing a tackle pad exercise. You know, the one where we're sort of running in squares and just jumping into them, whatever. Nice,
I'm a second row, Fred. Tackle never meant anything to me. Mine was a straight arm out like that.
You were probably asked to hold the pad, but you could see the Spanish guys were getting a bit touchy about this. It's like, oh, well. And he said, this guy's an international coach. He's pretty good at reading people. He said, Fred, can you ask him what's up? And cut long story short, they came back to him and said, they say that you're treating them like babies because you're making them use the cushions. They used to call these tackle pads the cushions. And they want to do the proper stuff. And he just started laughing and he went, Fred, tell them this is what we do at the beginning of every single All Black session. We just won the World Cup. This is how we start. It is the absolute basics. We build our whole game on the basics, and we can then pull out the spangly stuff every now and again because we've got such a solid foundation.
You make such a great point. But again, and this picks up on something you said earlier, and I've coached rugby, and I've coached something that the ELM, which was an All Black. When I coached Colts, we used to say elephant, lion, monkey, which is basically how to retain a ball, because the All Blacks will argue if you retain a ball, your opposition can't score. That is a blueprint. Now, the All Blacks, correct me if I'm wrong, have, I think, a win ratio of in excess of 78% of international games.
It's up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's the blueprint, in my understanding, of how to do things properly. The wheel's already been invented. The All Blacks know what works. They know how to win. Why don't other countries just copy what the All Blacks do?
And do it better. And because it is basics. But again, that's what I say. I think sometimes people want to go, well, we're going to do something more spangly, more sophisticated, more flamboyant, more. So good luck with that, because you have to build it on the foundations. So,
you do.
Well, we're in danger when rugby guys meet. There's a danger of us going right down a rabbit hole. So I've also got an eye on the time. So what haven't I asked you that I should have done?
That's one of my questions. Going back to questions, because Fred and I were discussing earlier what I called killer questions, and I used to love coming into a meeting and the person that you met said, Nigel, do you know, I've never ever been asked that question, and I used to take great pride in that, purely because that person will remember you, and you'll bump into them or something will happen. You're the guy who asked that question. So I love anything like that. Fred, I'm happy to talk all day with regard to sales process, and so ask whatever you want. I can't think of a question that.
I thought you'd enjoy that one. Look, I've got to be respectful of your time. What I do want to ask though is, where can people get in touch with you? Because I know you will talk about this, and you're hugely generous with sharing information, sharing, I think, very, very up to date and decent.
As I say, I can be contacted. Probably the easiest way is LinkedIn. I've got a profile on LinkedIn. If you want to email me, please feel free to email me at nigelbaldwin@btconnect.com, and I'm happy to spend as much time with people in order that they enjoy what they do. There's so many people that have a negative opinion of salespeople and what they do. Whereas, as I say on my LinkedIn post, selling is everything. Unless you can sell something, a business stops breathing. Yeah. It's as simple as that. And it's a way of finding the best way to sell, and a process that you love, and you will succeed at selling. I was the most awkward, tongue-tied, nervous mess. I could almost, I don't know if it happened, but I visualized myself sitting in meetings or being on the phone with sweat dripping off my nose. I honestly was that person. I've been in your shoes. I've made every mistake that somebody can in sales. I still make mistakes, but boy, have I had a blast.
Enjoy what you do. I love that. I will encourage people to connect with you on LinkedIn. You do share a lot of stuff. You have fun on it as well. Serious stuff, bit of fun, whatever. So, yeah, I've enjoyed it. Thank you for the time. No, and I so really, really do appreciate having the chat.
My pleasure.